Hey, what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and I wanted to take some time today to talk a bit about Heroic, Sepulcher are the first ones from a Warlock perspective. Now, about a week and a half ago, I'm assuming that Heroic testing is done at this point. Blizzard has had radio... They haven't said a single thing about if they're testing the final 3 bosses or not on Heroic. I would assume the answer is probably no now. They could very well come back in a few days in January and say, hey, yeah, we decided to test them. We changed our minds, whatever. It is what it is. Regardless, though, the 8 bosses we've tested are pretty cool bosses. I've really enjoyed all of them in testing. So today I want to review them all. I'll talk a little bit about them from a Warlock perspective, talking about why we played, what spec in each fight, which is basically demo in most fights, besides Pantheon. What specs, or I guess how Destro, Demo, and AF all could potentially pan out on these fights depending on tuning. Now, I said in my second to last video that I don't think Lock is like in a horrendous spot now, but I think we're playing Demonology more so because it's the only decent spec we have and not because it's actually the best spec in each fight. Now, it might end up being the best spec on certain fights, but I think it's just because Destro is really undertuned right now. And AF's in a weird spot where it can do good single target with Malefic Wrath, but at the same time, Demo does better, and AF is not good at Council Cleave. Like, on Pantheon, for example, I was behind Warriors, Shadow Priest, Monks, a handful of melee and non-Council Cleave-based classes, technically, that I probably shouldn't really be behind if AF and Destro are tuned in any kind of decent manner. But regardless, it is what it is. We will get into that. Now, 2 things before I start. Number 1, huge shout out to my patrons. Thank you a million times, guys, for all support. Heads up, the 9.2 Warlock spreadsheet should be created over the next 3 or 4 days or so, give or take. The tier 3 Felgar rank, my Patreon or higher, does indeed get early access to that. If you're interested in supporting, there should be a link somewhere down in the video description below. Also, that being said, we did indeed break 50k subs. Once again, thank you a million times, guys, for all the support. I really, truly do appreciate it. This year in general has been pretty up and down with WoW and things, but I want to just give a shout out to all y'all. Thank you for all the support so much over this year. It's been cool. It's been fun. And hopefully, I'm hoping 2022, yeah, 2022 is better for a lot of reasons. So with that being said, for both me and you guys, with that being said, now let's get into the video. Starting off with the first boss. I forgot his name, the trash boss. Okay, I figured it out. The first boss's name is Vigilant Guardian. This is actually the last boss we tested on PTR before the holiday break, and it reminds me a lot of the first boss of Hellfire Citadel. I think it was Hellfire Command, Hellfire Assault, I believe is what it is. The gist of it, there are certain, like, I guess, robots around the room. When you power them up, you can stand in the shield, and standing in the shield prevents you from dying. And when you do that enough and do a few other things around the room, basically the boss comes out of the wall, you fight him, and you kill him. The fight is really, really easy. At least it was during PTR testing. Keep in mind, it is heroic, but it was very easy, pretty undertuned. For the most part, I just played Demonology here because we played Demo on Anduin, but Demo and Destro seem more than fine for this fight. Now, this is also putting aside current tuning, because at this point, Demonology is tuned, I guess you could say, the best. Not that it's OP or anything, it's actually sort of mediocre, I feel like, with the tier set being bugged. But there's a lot of, like, Destro relevancy in this fight. Havoc windows, Inferno value, heavy rain of fire cleave. Affliction wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing either. I could easily see Affliction playing Decaying Soul Satchel and potentially Wrath of Consumption, the legendary, getting a lot of value here. But a lot of the ads do die pretty fast, and when it comes to the final boss, it appears to be mostly patchwork, albeit it shouldn't last for a very long time. So Demonology does pull a little ahead there, I feel like. You can get a lot of Implosion value, Demonic Strength value, maybe even Dreadlash Cleave value. Honestly, it's the first boss of the raid. All 3 specs are probably more than fine when it comes to this. I assume Mythic will be tuned a bit differently, and they'll probably end up fixing the boss from its semi-bugged form that it was in here. So I'm going to say, honestly, all 3 specs are probably fine here, but giving the nod a bit more towards Demonology and most likely Destruction. The second boss you're going to encounter is, at least, okay, the second boss we tested. This is actually, I think the 3rd boss in the raid. It was tested as like the 7th in the Dungeon Journal, but was shifted around after the testing. The second boss we have to look at today, I guess is a better way to put it, is Skolex the Insatiable Ravener. This is pretty much a single target fight. There's really no ads present. Even on Mythic, the room just gets covered in the blue pools you might see here in a little bit more than they really don't clear, so there's not much room to move around, I guess, in the end. This is a single target patchwork-esque kind of fight. I give the nod here to Demonology. If you want to play Affliction, AF with Malefic Wrath is probably not a bad option here. There is a lot of movement on the fight, but it's sort of planned movement and semi-periodic to the point where you can pretty much just sort of play around it with demonic core procs, called Dreadstalker's proc potentially, and Demonology just brings the best single target profile of all 3 Warlock specs, and that's putting aside power infusion, stamina scaling, which with Decaying Soul Satchel, if you're playing Night Fae in 9.2, Demonology looks very strong when it comes to those kind of scaling effects. So Skolex, you can play AF once again. Destruction really doesn't have a whole lot of single target relevancy. It's incredibly undertuned in the first place now, but it's not like AF where you can play, all right, let's slap on Malefic Wrath. I can do a decent bit of single target damage. So the nod here, I'd say, goes to Demonology, followed by Affliction, and then Destro if you are into doing subpar damage. Artificer Xymox is the next boss up here, and we unsurprisingly pulled this boss as Demonology. Now, this boss was pretty buggy during testing. It would go immune at times. We had to stop DPS because the scaling was off on it. But this does have the makings of a good Destro fight with potentially some Affliction, I guess, potential as well. It sort of reminds me of like Kel'Thuzad or Sorin or Dormazan at times, where you have like these large ad waves coming in here, which if stacked up fast enough, you can get a lot of Decaying Soul Satchel value. I guess it's every spec you're playing Night Fae, but Affliction with Sow the Seeds could excel a good bit here with this ad cleave. Now, these ads did die very fast in testing. Once again, there are some scaling issues here, but one of the strengths of Affliction is that you can pop your DSS legendary, your Soul Rot, and then funnel that huge haste crit amp into the boss, while also doing good damage via Rapture or Sow the Seeds, whatever, what have you. Now, Demonology can also do very good damage in this boss. You have Implosion Cleave, Demonic Strength Cleave, Bomber's Cleave if you want it, just Felguard Cleave in general. It's a strong overall toolkit for this boss. But I think the big thing is the important thing to see here is going to be how long the ads are actually alive when they're tuned properly and how relevant they actually are on Mythic. Now, when it comes to Mythic, which we'll be testing, I would assume, in a few weeks here, there is another ad that does a decent bit of damage. I believe brings a smog kind of mechanic with him. So we'll have to see how that actually goes as well as far as targeting and things are concerned. You could get decent Destro cleave value too if there's one like big priority Havoc cleave mob and also the chance to cleave on the boss. So all 3 specs have relevancy on this fight. All 3 specs bring a decent toolkit to it. I'm probably going to give the nod to Demonology here, followed by, I would probably say Destro and then AF, but it's one of those fights that all 3 specs could be good on. It just really depends on final tuning. At this point, with tuning being the way that it is, it looks like Demonology, but that could change once again, depending on tuning and tier sets and things like that, heading into the new year. Heroic Dausegne, it's not Dausegne, I learned that. The Fallen Oracle is the next boss we have up here, and we played predominantly Demonology on this boss. I did a couple pulls of Affliction, and while it wasn't bad, I feel this boss is, as you can see here, a good Demonology boss, but also brings with it a lot of destruction potential. Now, this ad did die really fast here, but outside of that one ad spawn, it spawns periodically throughout the fight. That's it. There's no ad waves, no large AoE fest. So this has the makings of potentially a very strong Affliction fight where you can get that Havoc cleave basically every time the actual ad spawns. Now, this is also pre-Boomkin nerfs and things. Affliction can get some decent multi-dot value here. Once again, I believe there was some scaling issues with the actual ad health, but you can see right here again, it spawns. That's a perfect timing for a Havoc window, pretty much as far as Destro is concerned, right? So Destro can get good value here. Now, outside of the ad spawning though, if it doesn't have a whole lot of health, I could see this being a Demonology fight. There's a lot of movement, which Demo is good at dealing with. Demonic core procs, dog procs, whatever, what have you. It's pretty solid, right? And once again, Demonology brings that the best single target damage profile. And seeing as how this boss has a sort of like a pseudo enrage on it, where essentially the whole room's going to be just covered in garbage and there's multiple waves coming at you. If you need that single target damage, this boss could very well be a Demonology boss. So I'm going to say off the bat, Demonology, but a good bit of potential for destruction if the spec gets buffed and is actually relevant for the first time this expansion, with some AF potential as well. If that ad's alive for a long time, AF can get a good bit of value with this 2-piece, 4-piece bonus. If you're playing Siphon Life, good Rapture value. So we have to wait and see where tuning's at on Mythic. All 3 specs have relevance here. I'm going to say number 1, Demonology, followed by Destro, and then potentially Affliction being pretty close to it as well. Prototype Pantheon is the next boss up here, and if you're tired of hearing Demonology bosses, well, this is the boss for you. I'm going to say this is either a Destro or Affliction fight. Now, you can play Demonology on it, but there has not been a better fight for Destro or Af, I guess council-wise, cleave-wise, then this fight is tier. This is a permanent 2-target fight. There are 4 bosses. When the first 2 hit 50% health, the other 2 spawn. When they hit 50, there are 4 targets, and they all need to die at the same time. So I get pretty good procs with my Destro 2-piece, 4-piece here, by the way. Usually the damage isn't that good, but hey, RNG is RNG. In the final phase, as mentioned, they all have to die at the same time. Now, there are 4 bosses stacked on top of each other. Number 1, that is full decaying soul satchel value, which could potentially mean that Affliction gains, you know, a bit more there. Maybe it's sort of hard to say, but people were playing Sow the Seeds with DSS in the final phase, and the Aflocks actually did decent damage. And I will say, when we killed this boss, if you want to see testing, there should be a link somewhere to the channel down below. Destro and Af were like 8, 9, and 10 on the meters. We lost like a Feral Druid, a Frost Decay, a Shadow Priest, a Windwalker, in a fight that is essentially built to a T when it comes to like using both of those specs toolkits. So I think this boss is a great example of how Af and Destro are just undertuned and in their respective settings like that. But either way, you can play Demonology here. You just don't really bring the same amount of relevant cleave. Now, if the bosses are stacked, you can get good implosion value. You can get good demonic strength, Dreadlash FTS value. So there is that. But even without Destro's 2-piece, 4-piece being reworked and the class is getting buffed right now, I was still relatively impressed with what it could do. And I guess, you know, there's the possibility of things actually getting buffed and changed. This looks like a very good Destro and Af fight. Now, I did not play Inevitable Demise Af here. I probably should have during the testing. With 2 permanent targets, you can probably rock some pretty high ID stacks and get some pretty relevant drain lives off. In that final phase, you have 4 permanent targets. That's basically what, 1 stack every agony take, give or take. It looks really, really strong. It's a hectic, chaotic fight towards the end, but this is the candidate for my favorite fight of the tier we've tested so far. And we haven't done Dreadlords, we haven't done the Algalon boss, and obviously you haven't tested the Jailer, but this fight and Anduin, from what we've seen in things, we ended up killing this fight in PTR testing, were actually incredible. So I'm going to say Af and or Destro at number 1 and 2 here. I really don't know which one actually is better because they're both, you know, a bit undertuned at this point, followed by Demonology in 3rd. But in the end, all 3 specs are probably relevant here and good. We'll have to see where tuning takes us. But this fight, I feel, is sort of like designed for Warlock's toolkit. Let's just pray we can actually, you know, be in for the fight. Lihuvim is the next boss up for testing, and I actually really enjoyed this boss, although it did feel a good bit like how the 9 feels at times, or what was another great example? The 9, a boss with I'd say frequent mechanics that can be sort of RNG based and mess up demonic tyrant timings. There's essentially a mechanic that comes out where if you get a debuff on you, like these players have now with that circle around them, you have to drop them in one spot in the room. And another player, I guess 2, will get marked with a circle around them, which you have to like sort of cleave those stars with to essentially clear them. Now, if you touch them with your body and not just the circle cleaving them, they'll pop and take up a good portion of the room. So Demonology Tyrant setups here were actually really frustrating because at times you wouldn't get the actual mechanic. You'd be fine. And there were times you get it and you really had to just force a Tyrant out. Destro and Af do have some potential here. It reminds me a lot of Kingaroth, and I believe THC mentioned it as well, where when you come to the intermission, you have these ads around the room. There are like 4 little, I guess, cubbies they spawn in. We ended up splitting the raid in half and trying to kill 2 per. I would assume during prog, if you can do it, I mean, optimally, you want to have, you know, 4 parts of the raid, kill all 4 at once. But depending on tuning, you might have to choose which 2 you end up leaving up, which is sort of random at times to deal with their mechanics. The unfortunate part is that they're actually spread a decent bit apart to where I'm not really sure if you can actually get relevant, like, Destro Havoc Cleave. I know certainly you can't get, like, relevant Af Cleave, because here's one, for example, and the other one's, you know, to my right by about 30-ish yards. I might be able to stand in the middle and get some Havoc Cleave, but they have to die pretty fast. If you don't kill them quickly, they come to life, and you have to deal with their entire mechanics, which, as you can see, one died fast, and this one didn't, and it's at full health. So, it's going to be an interesting fight. This is one of those fights I feel like it sort of reminds me of like Soul under Dormizane testing, where Warlock felt okay. There's potential, but it felt like there are classes that could do what you did, maybe a little better. Now, that could change as well, depending what ads are up, what you have to end up killing. You can get really good Havoc Cleave here. If there is guaranteed to be 2 ads up and a boss, hey, Destro Lock can crank this. Warlock has relevant, frequent relevant CDs for basically every ad phase. And at the same point here, if AF is relevant, you can get a good bit of actual dot cleave here. So there's potential on this fight. But I'm going to say overall number 1, Demonology, followed by Destro, and then possibly Affliction, depending on tuning. Once again, with tier sets and things not being really out yet, or I guess finished at this point, it's hard to say. But I think this fight fits Destro's toolkit decently if it's in a good spot. But otherwise, this is probably just a Demonology boss that we play and just rip big tyrants off whenever we can, and hopefully the boss falls over. Halondrus the Reclaimer has the best voice lines. I don't know if you can call them voice lines actually, because it's a robot. The best lines, however you want to call it, whatever you want to call it, in this raid. It's actually incredible. So I think this boss could actually be a really good Destruction Warlock boss. You see this one pylon off to the left here being broken. The frontal the actual boss does needs to be placed on the pylon to break the actual shield. You can see right there, if you played Warlock once in your life, that's a very, very, very good Destro cleave scenario. Now, obviously, okay, you won't have Havoc for both these pylons here, but every other one, maybe every third, depending on timings and things, you will. You can get a lot of relevant Destro cleave. Now, the boss also, once these all die, walks from one portion of the room to the next, and then to a final spot. And each, I guess, subsequent part of the room has one additional pylon in it. So this is, like I said, there's a potential for a lot of relevant Destro cleave here. You can hit the boss, however, when he's walking from one part of the room to the next, which, if you're looking at it from that perspective, could technically maybe favor Affliction a bit more, which, depending on tuning and things, AF could bring a decent bit of relevant damage to these pylons. You can charge snipe them, you can get double charge with UA Drain Soul. So there's relevancy to all 3 specs here. I play Demonology because, number 1, the boss is undertuned. It had far less health, or far little health than it should have had during testing, but it was really the only spec that is doing relevant damage on PTR currently. I believe I did 1 pull as Destro, and I was just really, really disappointed with it. The potential is there, but with the spec being so undertuned the way that it is, you can see there's an Infernal now from somebody there, but who knows why, because Demonology is just better at this point. There's just not a whole lot of, relevancy to playing it when Demo does what it does, just essentially better, because the damage it puts out is so subpar. But either way, this could be a really good Destro boss. Potential for AF, but at this point, if tuning stays the way that it is, we probably just play Demonology. You can get a little bit of relevant cleave, I guess, damage on the move here. We'll see where it goes. This boss has a lot of Warlock potential, depending on how tuning ends. But yeah, that's a question in itself. And finally, we have Heroic Anduin. This boss, I'm going to say off the bat, I don't know what spec you play here. This boss feels like it's a final raid boss shoved into the middle of a raid. Anduin is a hectic, chaotic boss, but in a good way. The fight looks really, really cool. So in phase 1, up top, it is basically single target based. You have these star sign kind of effects coming out. We have to match the opposite colors and things. This barrier mechanic you see here is essentially what the fight revolves around, a good portion of it. You have to heal through the barrier before other mechanics come out, like the overlaps here, the arrows, the star sign ability right here you see coming out. But when it comes to going downstairs with the Kingsmorn frontal, you'll see in a minute here, it's a large, black, I guess, effect on the ground. If you stand in it, it brings you downstairs. There are multiple ads that need to be healed and killed downstairs. That's the actual frontal right there, which Destro brings a lot of relevant cleave to. There's one large ad and multiple small ads. And killing them, or healing the ones that need to be healed from the healers, gives Anduin energy. Whenever he reaches 100 energy, he essentially rips the soul out of him. If you're watching this video, it's the Lich King. You're watching a 9.2 testing video. Spoilers ahead. It's the Lich King. Which, when the Lich King comes out, he spawns a bunch of actual ghoul zombie ads and 1 or 2 larger ads. They need to be killed. And when that phase ends, Anduin comes back, and there are 5 ads around the room. They need to be kicked, basically within 2 seconds, and killed as well. So there's a lot of relevancy to Destro cleave here. Demonology brings good single target damage, also a bit of good AoE, implosion value, and Affliction can get a lot of value into a seed spam and other kind of relevant effects. So it really depends. There's relevancy to Vile Taint builds of AF, Reign of Chaos Destro builds, just straight up Demonology as a whole with implosion cleave. It's really, really hard to say, but this fight looks, this is the actual downstairs part here. This fight looks hectic, chaotic, but in a really, really cool way. You can see how relevant Destro cleave could be here too. Big Havoc windows, Cataclysm value, Reign of Fire, Reign of Chaos. This fight could be really, really, really awesome in a really strong Warlock fight. The thing is, even if we end up just playing Demonology in this fight, when Anduin reaches 100% health here, he essentially splits his soul, like we said, and the Lich King comes out. Now, on top of having to kill all the ghouls and the ads that are, you know, running around and killing everybody, the damage you deal to the Lich King, Anduin's like shadow or whatever you call it, is Anduin takes 150% of that damage. So essentially you're damaging Anduin at the same time while you're killing the Lich King and getting back into that phase 1 or that phase 3, whatever you want to call it. It feels like the fight's going to require a lot of unique damage profiles. For example, you might even want a couple Warlocks, one playing Destro for that big ag cleave downstairs, or the cleave going into the phase we'll see here for rate of chaos value, or on the ads you have to kick after this phase. And you might want one Demo Lock for the actual big single target damage on the boss, on Anduin, and on the Lich King whenever he spawns, because once again, Anduin takes 150% of that damage. So really interesting fight. I'm excited to see where it goes. Looks pretty good. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I hope that gave you all a better feeling and just general understanding of how Locke is positioned currently going into Sepulcher. Now, once again, we haven't even done any mythic testing. Warlock hasn't received a blue post on anything. No tier, no class tuning, no changes, no covenant tuning, no legendary tuning. We're not even sure if double legendary is going to be a thing for mythic prog early on at this point. So there's a lot that's still up in the air. People have been asking a lot about, hey, how does Locke look in the raid? Because demo looked pretty good. Yeah, but it's been bugged since the first build, which has made it a decent bit better. I think it actually is. So either way, hopefully this video clarified a bit on how good we're actually looking and how good we could potentially be if Blizz decides to step up and actually tune the class the way that it should be. Either way, thanks for watching, guys. Any Week Wars, profiles, add-ons, once again, all available for free on my Twitch. Want to swing by, hang out, grab them anytime, ask any questions, feel free to do so. Let me know what you guys think of, I guess, the current review of Locke in the comment section below as well. I'm curious to get y'all's takes on, I guess, us. It's the final tier of the expansion. I want to be decent. I want to be good. And I'm not saying we need to be ultimate meta, best at everything, but I mean, I'm a little worried for 9.2 at this point from a Warlock perspective. Once again, one massive shout out to my patrons as well. Thank you a million times, guys, for all support this year. Heads up again, I guess heads up a million times. The tier 3 Felguard rank on my Patreon doesn't need to get early access to the 9.2 Warlock spreadsheet, which should be coming out over the next few days, give or take. With that being said, I'll catch y'all again soon on stream. Peace.